Molo Sambonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, shalom, good people. Yo, sorry for that slight delay in the start time of the show. In fact, a lot of you don't even know that there's a show right now. Well, there is. I'll work on that post-production, but welcome to it, Sambonani. We're going to have a very brief show because I really think there's a few things we need to chew on insofar as determining or discussing rather, the state of the politics right now. So, it's been a crazy bumper week so far, and it's only Wednesday, of course. Just give me a second, people. Let me just sort myself out here. I've just arrived from being on the road from Cape Town, so I'm not 100% organized. There we go. That should be no interruptions. I do have some interesting guests tonight. That's a bit too bright. I do have some interesting guests tonight on the show. Fellas who I do think will add some rather interesting flavor to this particular broadcast as we look to unpack the election fortunes of the Democratic Alliance. Now, if you watched Liberty and Friends this weekend on Sunday, you would have seen that we focused quite a bit on Action SA in its role as a particular kingmaker at the moment. So tonight we're going to discuss the Democratic Alliance because it's finding itself, in some cases by surprise, wearing the mayoral chain in various municipalities and metros across the country. This as opposition parties, of course, who, although there was a failure to establish coalition talks or coalitions in some municipalities, those same opposition parties are still supporting DA candidates for mayor. In fact, the most recent iteration was in the eThekwini municipality, so that's Durban, of course, where the DA's candidate, one Nicole Graham, losing out to the incumbent, I need to Kenneth Kaunda. His surname is Kaunda, but his first name is actually Polisi Kaunda, who got, I think, 116 votes to Graham's 103 votes. I could be wrong on those numbers. I'll have my two guests, maybe as they check those numbers out, correct me. Speaking about those two guests, and actually, no, before I get to those two guests, you, dear viewer, the only thing I require of you, please, especially as some of these channels, or specifically Facebook, is shadow banning my content, please hit that like button. Hit that like button, and please, after the show, share the stream and encourage your friends to watch. I must remind you that Facebook is officially shadow banning this channel, and I need your help in getting it out. So with that being said, I did mention that I'll have two guests, two fellows, of course, from the Institute of Race Relations. I like to call him one of their premier political analysts, someone who I've always looked to when it comes to asking questions around trends and crunching the numbers. I'm talking, of course, about Marius Rett. There he is on the show as I shoot a fly away. Marius, welcome to the BDL show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that introduction.
Awesome, my brother. Welcome to it. Another fellow who you've seen on the show, of course, before, the host or the co-host of the Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree podcast, a podcast you can find, of course, on the Daily Friend. That's www.dailyfriend.co.za. Nicholas Lorimer. There he is on screen. Nick, good evening. Welcome to the BDL show.
Good evening. I'm feeling flavorful.
Well, welcome to it. Hopefully we're going to have a hot show as we provide some analysis, of course, fellas. I'm just going to ask both of you fellas just to center yourselves, please, a bit better on your cameras. It's shifted a bit now that I've added all three of us on. But with that being said, let's get straight into it, guys. Interesting mixed bag of results. Generally speaking, a DA, a Democratic Alliance, who initially, given their first set of results in Ekurhuleni, surprised, perhaps, at receiving various gold chains draped around their mayoral candidates, Marius?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a surprise for the DA. I think it shows you was a surprise that Phil Wenteke, who was their candidate in Ekurhuleni, she actually decided not to resign from her post as an MPL in the Gauteng legislature. And she, I'm not sure if she was at the council meeting, but she definitely wasn't a councillor. She hadn't resigned as an MPL and wasn't sworn in as a councillor. So the candidate they put up, Tanya Campbell, she won, I think, to the surprise of everybody, including herself, most probably. So, yeah, I mean, I think that was the first big surprise. And then we saw what happened in Joburg subsequently, and then Tshwane, where the two DA candidates for Speaker and Mayor were elected unopposed, which is quite interesting. But, yeah, I think so. I mean, that's out of half the metros now in South Africa. Half of them are out of the 8 metros, half are governed by the DA and half are governed by the ANC. So it's and it's a couple of them that wouldn't have thought. Ekurhuleni, I think, is definitely a surprise. And Joburg and Tshwane, I think, on the trends, probably not such a big surprise, but the election results maybe, considering that the vote share that the DA did get in those two cities. And there was almost very nearly a big surprise in eThekwini today. And I think if the ANC had lost eThekwini, that would have been. I think if the vote had gone ahead on Monday, then the ANC would definitely have lost eThekwini.
Well, I have the same hunch too, that they basically bought themselves time. Remember, just for the sake of the viewers, the electing of, or was meant to be the election of the mayor in eThekwini or Durban was meant to happen on Monday. But Monday, of course, it was disrupted by a faction or a grouping from the ANC who literally stormed the council chambers, makeshift as they were, upending tables.
I just want to point out that the ANC, apparently they were claiming that it was actually EFF people who were dressed in ANC regalia who disrupted the meeting on Monday. So let's just, so that's apparently one of the claims, but yeah, to be fair to the ANC.
Okay, so we don't know who actually stormed that venue, but the claim is, of course, that it was either EFF or ANC members who did this. But the point really being this, there was a definite sense of panic in the Durban ANC echelons as they saw the writing on the wall in other metros and asked themselves too, Nicholas, could this happen to us?
No, definitely. What made it so unpredictable as well is just how many parties have a seat in the eThekwini metro. There are parties I've never heard of before: the TA, the APF, the PFP, MOSA, the UIM, the DLC, and that's not all of them. There's even more. So there's this big chunk of seats that were up for grabs. And once it became clear that the IFP wasn't sticking to the deal that the national government seems to have, the national party seems to have done with the ANC, and once it became clear that the EFF was probably going to back the DA candidate, suddenly all these small parties became the deciding votes. And as we saw, no one knew, I think, until the votes were counted, who was going to win. And in this case, the ANC managed to squeak home, but I suspect that's probably because they offered some of those small parties something at the last minute.
Absolutely.
Crazy stuff.
Guys, I want to sort of move us along here because I want to come back to the DA as a party itself. We said lots in the run-up to these particular council elections around the DA stance to coalitions and how rarely in the run-up to these elections, what we saw from the corporate media, what we saw from the commentariat in this country is an almost unfair scorn and bile directed at the DA's particular stance around what it sought to achieve in a coalition versus the near silence about other opposition parties and their behavior or their stance. What is with the bees and the flies? What's going on? And their stance regarding, what were then upcoming coalition elections. Goodness gracious me. Sorry, guys. It's like, what is this? It's not a bee. It's one of these. Gosh. Anyway, sorry for that distraction. I just, when things fly around me, I'm just like, I'm one of these people. I digress. But in the run-up to this particular election, very little was said about, for instance, let's for a moment go into the IFP, go into the Patriotic Alliance, who took a side which a lot of people were just perplexed by. The overall mood in the country was that we are moving away from the ANC and perhaps wanting to envision a life outside of the ANC. Yet, very little was said about these particular parties, Marius, which then propped up the ANC.
Yeah, the DA has always got pretty much a ordeal, I think, from much of the media in South Africa. We saw what happened when the election results came out. The DA was getting attacked for, not wanting to go into coalition with the ANC, and this would, a couple of people pointing out this is going to probably allow the ANC and the EFF to go into coalition together, and this is a huge problem. And the same kind of people who are telling you don't vote for the DA because they're a bunch of racists and what have you. And there hasn't seemed to be much criticism or examination of the Patriotic Alliance's stance, where Gayton McKenzie has been pretty open. The only reason that they've gone to into alliance with the ANC is for basically 4 positions. I mean, he said you can't do anything if you're not a mayor or an MMC, and it's and I think I've mentioned, I'm not sure if I've mentioned on the show, but the way that the ANC and the PA were swapping municipalities in the Northern Cape. It's absolutely disgraceful, acting as if these municipalities belong to the various parties to swap around like stickers on a playground. It's an absolute disgrace. Those municipalities belong to the people who live there. They don't belong to these parties to swap around to give mayorships away and MMC posts and so on. So but I do think, and the IFP I think also got a bit of a free ride. Also didn't get criticized for saying it's going to support the ANC in municipalities in KZN where the ANC was the biggest, and the vice versa with the IFP. But I think Nick will be able to tell us a bit more, but there seems to have been a bit of a grassroots, in a way, a revolt against what the national IFP was saying. And it seems that these coalition agreements fell apart at the municipal level. And we've seen how around the country, the IFPs kicked out the ANC, not around the country, around KwaZulu-Natal. The IFPs worked with other parties to kick the ANC out. I think Newcastle and Umkhatuzi, which is Richards Bay, are 2 places that come to mind immediately. I think Newcastle, there's a coalition of the IFP, Action SA, the DA, EFF, and a local party called Team Sugar South Africa, which teamed up to kick out the ANC. And I think in Richards Bay, it's the IFP, the EFF, and the DA, I think you've got together to kick out the ANC. Are you still there, Sifle? I think. What do you think, Nick?
It's kind of ominous because all I could hear was crickets in the background. But I agree with you, Marius. What seems to have happened is that the IFP said one thing in the media, which is we're going to back the ANC, and then when it came down to it, it didn't. And what I've heard is that this is due to basically a kind of revolt. By parts of the IFP who said to themselves, we really don't like what National has agreed to here. In KZN, even to this day, there's still occasionally violence between the IFP and the ANC. And of course, many of their members, I think, really remember the wounds from the conflict there. But what makes it even worse is that the ANC seems to have had a particular policy of rubbing salt in the wound. The IFP, I saw that there's a municipality, I think, that got named after a guy who wrote a book trashing the IFP. So I'm not surprised that the IFP on the ground said, no, we are not doing a deal with these guys. We are going to do our own thing and screw you. I heard that there were IFP MPs who were much more keen on working with the DA anyway. And that seems to have happened now in a lot of municipalities, Newcastle, Richards Bay, and other ones too, where you've had this sort of informal IFP-DA alliance, and that's sent the ANC packing in a lot of places where they expected to cruise to victory with only a couple of concessions given to the IFP.
Guys, I'm going to taper off this conversation only because I'm having a few connectivity issues. But the point I put on the screen is actually an important one, because it seems as though we've come back full circle. One of the points that the DA made at the beginning of coalition talks as a principle is that it was refusing to work with or go into a coalition with the EFF because of its experience in the previous term of government, i.e., casting the EFF as unreliable, and pointing out that they're flip-floppers, and one can't therefore be reliant on their votes, not only in choosing a mayor, but on the other big-ticket items such as passing a budget, voting in an IDP, which is the plan around which a municipality rallies in order to determine spending and development areas. But it seems to find itself in the exact same spot, or that very spot that it said it will avoid. Morris?
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. And what you also got to remember with budgets and RDPs, to pass it, you need 50% plus one of the entire council. When you vote for a mayor, you only need a simple majority of the quorum. So it's a lot harder to pass these kinds of things. And we've seen how the EFF has acted before. It's withheld its votes and so on. And we saw what happened in China. China had nearly collapsed the council there. So the EFF will be definitely be able to hold the DA to ransom in some municipalities in China, depending how the coalition holds up there. As from what I understand, is the DA, Action SA plus Freedom Front plus the ACDP and COPE gives you a stable 50% plus one coalition in China. So hopefully China will have this government will be a bit more stable there. But I think we're definitely going to see the EFF up to its usual shenanigans in Ekurhuleni and Joburg. And I'm not sure you said it. It might even have been you, Nick, that the DA is basically going to be governing vote to vote.
Yeah, I think that the DA is in a really terrible position if they don't play this well. These municipalities are ticking time bombs. Without some kind of stable coalition, and especially with such ideological differences, for example, between the DA and the EFF, you actually can't fix anything. You just can't. They've been put up there, and now they are just going to take blame. They're not going to be able to pull back from this. They're not going to be able to do anything to fix the problem. They're just going to take blame. So what do you do if you're the DA? Well, if you're not able to govern things, you have to, I think, use the opportunity to make a stand, make a point, and force the other parties to declare their principles. Mm-hmm. So maybe what the DA should do is, for example, in Joburg, they said they were going to set up a land invasions unit to protect private property and basically prevent a lot of land invasions that have been going on around the city. Do it. Get it into council, get it into the mayor's office, and force the EFF to vote you down. Force the EFF to collapse your government. Force Action SA to declare where they stand on some of these issues. And I think that's probably the best move for the DA now, because right now, I just don't think anyone really can govern these municipalities.
Sorry, guys. Sorry to jump back in. I just had a connection issue. Maybe let that be the last area in which we focus in answering that key question. Can a DA administration really expect reasonably, and you already touched on this, can it reasonably expect, Nicholas, I'm going to come back to you, to govern and be able to even roll out any program of action in any of these metros? Or are we going to see a repeat of 2016, to which case, what does the DA do now?
No, I don't think they can roll out anything. I don't think they can do really anything that they want to do. To a limited degree, they can probably do some things, but with the knife of the EFF sort of sitting over them, there's very little they can do to kind of get out of this. So I think they need to play it kind of smart here. And the big difference between now and 2016 is in 2016, the DA very much made it clear quite quickly that it wanted to stay in government, and it was willing to appease the EFF, particularly in Joburg, in order to do that. Now, the key is, can the DA stick by its principles, stick by its governing philosophy and its ideas, and not fall for the temptation of easy power? Because the EFF is probably happy to keep them in power so long as they're getting stuff out of it, so long as the DA is doing what they want them to do. If they stand up to them and are willing to go back into the opposition benches, then they might do quite well. But we'll see. There's a lot of incentives for people who have suddenly gotten a big pay increase to keep doing what they're doing, and stay in government. But and they need to basically resist that.
Just on that point, also, we need to hope that our political parties start becoming a lot more mature, because
Yeah.
in these metros where the ANC's lost majorities, it's very unlikely that we are going to see anytime soon any of these cities governed by a 50% plus one party again. I don't think we're going to see any party win more than 50% of the vote in Joburg or Tshwane or Ekurhuleni in the next 20 or 30 years. And that is going to be the case in South Africa very soon, where no party wins more than 50% of the vote in a national election, and we're going to be governed in coalition, and we're going to need our parties to work together, obviously the ideological difference will always exist, but we need to get a point where governance comes first, rather than parties and people with in these parties putting themselves first and jostling for positions and so on, rather than actually trying to govern a place.
Absolutely. Fellas, I'm governed by time and seemingly a trash internet connection. Goodness me. Apologies, dear viewers, for that. Guys, final thoughts on this. And of course, what can people look forward to on the Daily Friend? Both of you are guys who are on the Daily Friend. If you were John Steenhuisen now, what do you do? What's your decision making? What are you thinking through strategically in terms of managing this mess?
I think
Morris?
Nick made a good point. So you do what in Joburg, you put up you create anti-land invasion units, or you maybe also say something like, we're going to have our tenders be very open, and we're not going to have any racial procurement. We're going to go for the best price and the people who we think will do the best job. And then if the council gets collapsed, we say, look, we try to run this place, and the EFF and Action SA, or whatever the case might be, they're the ones letting the ANC back in. So good luck. And I mean, these metros are actually a bit of a poison chalice, because we saw that the DA and the ANC both lost significant support in all three Gauteng metros, but especially for the DA in Joburg and Tshwane, which they governed various times over the past 5 years. So yeah, I think, as I say, it's a poison chalice, and I think the DA's got its work cut out for it. But it's an opportunity, and I think if the party can run these places well, against the odds, it could bode very well for 2024. But it's going to be a very hard job, and you're going to need nerves of steel, I think, if you DA mayor standing up to the EFF, and because people will be rooting for them to fail. So yeah, you're going to need nerves of steel and ice in your veins, I think, for the next, not even next 5 years, for the next 5 weeks, I think, if you're a DA mayor.
Yeah, you can't govern under these conditions. So if I was John Steenhuisen, I'd get out of government as quickly as possible, and I'd do it by finding a nice hill to die on, whatever it is, whether it's something in our manifesto, whether it's something in our core principles, and just falling on our sword there and letting the government collapse. Because right now they're dancing to the Action SA and EFF's tune, and they need to take the political momentum back.
Guys, I'm sorry to add one more question here, but I think we're sort of skirting it, but we need to maybe just hash it out for a moment. Maybe final thoughts. What is behind this weird unspoken love child relationship between Action SA and the EFF? Because at face value, it seems counterintuitive and it doesn't make sense. But it seems now that that is Action SA and the EFF, an almost united front positioned against the DA, or not positioned against per se, but positioned almost priming, or sorry, I thought of this word in Zulu, almost like when you're preparing yourself to ambush or to have a gotcha moment against the DA. Thoughts, Marius?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. If you take Action SA's values at face value, Herman Mashaba has come out and said he is completely opposed to expropriation without conversation. He's on record before in saying socialism is a terrible idea, capitalism is the way to go. He said, he wrote a book called The Capitalist Crusader, and he's always, from his public statements, he's always been a guy who seems to be on the side of capitalism and the free markets and that. And we all know the EFF's policies. They are completely opposed to the free markets and free trade and between people and all that kind of thing. So I don't know if Julius Malema has nude photos of him and Mashaba and he's safe somewhere or something like that. And he's, but there's something. I don't know what's behind that. Nick's maybe got some better insights. He was in, I think he knows maybe a little bit more, but it's a very strange thing. And it's that's going to be one of the big dynamics to watch over the next couple of years. I think is between Action SA and the EFF. But I do think the people who voted for Action SA, black and white, I don't think I would guess that they're not really particularly big fans of the EFF. So I think Herman Mashaba and Action SA must also be quite careful about who they decide to partner up with. I think if I had to guess, I would imagine Action SA's voters are people who lean more towards the DA or even, in the reform wing of the ANC, if such a thing exists, but rather than the EFF.
Because Nick, even as I throw it to you, I want to add, Herman is almost unashamed in him saying that I will entertain no coalition talks as a headliner for today if the EFF are not involved. Something is seriously amiss here.
Yeah, I don't know what this is really about. I mean, so for those who don't know, I was a DA councillor in 2016 in Joburg when Mashaba got elected, and then I resigned about 18 months or so later, partly due to the direction the DA was taking. But in that time, I saw a change in Mashaba. He originally was quite willing to sort of fight with the EFF and say, look, if these guys if they're going to mess us around, I don't want to do business with them. And then he started drifting, and a couple of months into government, he was basically ignoring the DA and talking to the EFF, and he was attending meetings where the EFF was dominant. He seemed to be. It almost was like he preferred the EFF to the DA. And that trend has continued ever since he's left the DA and gone on and done his own thing. He still seems to have a very warm, very cordial relationship with them. He seems to think of them as his closest allies. And I don't really understand it. From a strategic point of view, I think what the EFF is doing here by putting up these DA mayors is showing the ANC that they need to basically submit to the EFF or else they're going to suffer this punishment again and again. And I wonder if Action SA was perhaps, despite what Mashaba said, caught a little bit by shock by what the EFF's move was going to be here, and is thinking to themselves, man, if the EFF is going to vote for the DA, then we have to as well. Because can you imagine if, let's say in Joburg, the ANC only got back in to the mayorship because Action SA were the ones who sat out, not the EFF? It would look really bad for Action SA. So I'm sure that's part of the reason why they have decided to back DA mayors all over the place.
Absolutely. Guys, I must end it there and thank the both of you for just lending your analysis and opinion on these issues. That is, of course, Marius Ruet from the Institute of Race Relations. You also find Marius, of course, as a writer and contributor to the Daily Friend. Same thing with Nicholas, more so his podcast. That is Two Crickets in a Thorn Tree. Make sure you head over to www.dailyfriend.co.za to find all that content, news, analysis, and opinion. Fellas, thank you for your time to the both of you. And thank you, dear viewer, for watching this episode of the BDL Show. Apologies once again for the haphazard and poor connection. I've only just arrived in Johannesburg, so I didn't have enough time to set up my usual goodies, my bag of tricks properly. But with that being said, I am in Johannesburg for the next week and a half. Some exciting meetings in this part of the world as we gear up to a very interesting next year. Wow, guys, stay tuned to the BDL channel. It's going to look very different and have some very, very interesting content if the meetings I'm having are anything to go by. With that being said, thank you very much once again for watching. Please, guys, remember, Facebook is looking to ban this page and already are shadow banning it. They're throttling the channel. So please help me out by hitting that like button and, of course, sharing the show after the broadcast. It really will go a long way in helping getting around those censors in the Silicon Valley cartel. With that being said, thank you so much once again. And remember, as I always say at the end of every show, never trust a commie.